Hi everyone. In this video, I'll cover everything you need to know about pivots in MS Excel. And it's gonna be a lengthy video, but I assure you, if you stick around till the end, you'll learn all the basics of pivot and you'll be able to do much more than merely add a pivot table in Excel. Okay? So with this, let's begin. Now, first of all, what is a pivot table and why do we need to use it? For answering that question, right here in front of you, there's an extensive data set that I have created. It's dummy sales data for different departments, items, and zone. Okay. At present, this data holds no more meaning to me other than merely storage of data, right? In order to be able to take informed decisions backed by this data, I will need to make it into something more comprehensible, readable, and easily understandable, right? So, Pivot comes as an excellent summarizing tool in this case, and you can not just summarize it, you can also visualize it with the help of pivot charts. First of all, how to add a pivot table. For adding a pivot, select Insert and there you select Pivot Table. It will ask you two questions. First, where is your source data? Starting from the column headers, you go ahead and select the entire range for your source data. Okay, once you're done with that, you have to specify where you want to see the pivot report. I'd suggest you go for a new worksheet because it's less clutter. Anyways, you can select existing worksheet if required. For now, I'll stick to the new worksheet and I'll press OK here. It will redirect me to a new sheet wherein it's blank for now, but you are able to see the pivot table fields, right? And these fields are nothing but they are the column headers of your source data set. Now if you go back and see, it's exactly the headings that were there in your columns. Right now with pivot, you have the liberty to play around with these. You can make them into rows, columns, filters, and the numerical values can be summarized under the values field. Okay. Let's move on to the questions that I have framed. And as we solve these questions, I'll cover various features of pivot table and when to use what and how. Okay. So first question is, what is the total sales value and quantity? With the help of this question, we'll learn how to do sum of one column that has all the numbers in them. Okay. So in order to take the total sales value, I'll drag the sales value into this values field. And if you notice, it has automatically done a sum of these. Okay. So right now the total sales value is 1,48,600 and it is the sum of this column. That's what we're getting out of it. Likewise, in order to get the total sales quantity, we'll do the same thing. We'll drag quantity sold here and we'll get the sum. Okay. So in order to get sum, this is how you'll go. Now, it doesn't look nice that sum of sales value is written here, right? Or sum of quantity sold. Now we learn how to change the name of the table headers in a pivot table. Click here and select value field settings. Now custom name option is there. Now instead of sum of sales value, I can add total sales value. Okay, so you can rename it however you want to rename it. Just make sure you do not rename it as one of these fields because otherwise it will show an error. You cannot rename it as sales value. You have to make a add some additional word or so. Okay, so here I'm making it total sales value and it looks easily comprehensible than sum of sales value. Okay, and likewise we can do for quantities sold as well. Now imagine for some reason it didn't give you the sum, it's not adding it up and you are seeing averages instead. So again in value field settings you have an option of summarize values by, and here you can go ahead and select sum here. All right, so that solves first question. Now moving on to the second question, what is the zone wise sales value? Okay, so in values I'll again take sales value here and in rows I will add zones. So what it's giving me is for each zone what was the total sales value for the said period. Third question is, what is the month wise sales value? Exactly similar approach. You can remove zone from here and drag months into this field. Okay, now against each month you can see the sales value and you have your answer here. All right. Now, this is just to tell you, how you can use the fields in different areas. Moving on, now let's learn filters in pivot table. Okay. So, fourth question, if you see, I'm asking that in March month, how was East sales? Okay. So here you will need to use zone as well as month, right? So one way to do it is either you can just click here and add a filter here. Okay, this is for month March. Okay, but now it's showing the across all of the zones, so you'll have to add zone here too. Okay, now you can just read it out from here that in March month it was 3000. If you use it as a filter, okay, you can select East out of this and get the only relevant value. So here I have removed all of the pivot fields, but if you notice, right in front of zone, there is a symbol of filter that's being shown, right? So this is to tell you that you have some active filter in your selection. Now, very often when we are reusing the same pivot over and over again, we might miss out on certain filters that we have previously put and end up getting some wrong information. Okay, so you have to be sure that all of the filters are removed, and it's hard to do it manually, especially when there's a lot of pivot fields. So in order to do it easily, like remove all the filters in one go to data tab and select clear. Right in front of filter you'll see the option to clear all filters. Once you click here, it will automatically remove all of the previously selected filters and make it a clean sheet for you to restart your work with. All right. Now, next question is, what is the selling price trend across zones? All right. So for this, I'll take zone here and I'll select selling price from here. And I think there's some filter right in front of month. So just to be sure, I'll go ahead and remove it the way I showed to you. Okay. Now, there's one problem with this. If you notice, the selling price in our data set is nowhere close to being this high. Okay, it's hardly 100, 200, 300 bucks. Okay, so here adding up selling prices is not the correct way, right? For example, now if you're going to deal with ratios, you cannot add them. Okay, and if you want to deal with percentages, you cannot add them. And likewise for selling price, if you're selling items worth 10 to 100 in your store, you cannot just add them up and say, oh, this is the selling price. You have to take an average and say, okay, this is my average selling price for my store or so. Okay, so wherever you need averages or counts, like whatever is required, you can just go here, select value field settings, and in summarize values by, go ahead and select an average, because that's the suitable way to do it. All right. Now, the next question is, how much did East Zone contribute towards detergent sales? Okay, so I do not remember as of now where detergent was there. Okay, so I will go to my data set and see which column header covers it. So if you can see, it's there under item column. So I will use that as a filter here. Okay, and then I will select only detergent out of it. Now I'll drag sales value to the values section, and here I can see in number form that out of 23,000 total detergent sales, 5,000 is what came from East, right? So that's one way of doing it. Ideal way is to show this as a percent of grand total. For this, right click here and select show values as, and go ahead and select percent of column total. Now depending upon your data, you can select either of these options, and here the best fit is percent of column total. It will convert your grand total into 100% and then the zone wise values into percentages out of the 100%. So my next question is, what is the date wise trend of sales quantity across all India? So here you need not bother about department, zone, whatever. You just need to take the sales quantity in values, and against this you plot the dates. If I drag dates here, it's automatically taking months as well. It's a pivot's way of grouping the data. Like if you click here, you will be able to see January dates. This is how you'll see February dates. Now you do not want to see it at a month level, so you can just anyways remove it from here. Now it's giving you a day-wise trend of the quantity sold. This is a great information, but it becomes easily readable if you convert it into a chart, right? So here go to insert pivot chart, and it will give you the best suited fit for your data. You can either press OK here. If not, if you want to see it from a different point of view, or in a different way, you can obviously select what sort of chart do you want, and any other chart element if you want to add, or you can format it. And at any point of time you can go ahead and change chart type from design tab. You can change chart type, you can add in more details, you can switch across rows and columns. And now you see it is a pivot table, and if you do this switch row and column to a normal table chart, it will not automatically be able to change your table as well. But right now these are interconnected, so if I select switch row and column, it's not merely switching row column here, it's also doing it to the table. So this is one of the benefits of using pivot charts over normal charts. Okay, now next question is, what is the home care department's data summary in the month of April? For this, I'll remove date from here, and home care is a department, so I'll filter department and I'll take months here. Alright, now I'll take only home care out of these two, and in month I'll select April, and this is quantity sold. Let me also add sales value and the selling price here. Okay, now I want to see sales value is okay, selling price is not okay. So this one I'll go ahead and summarize values by. You can either go to the values, click there, or else you can just right click here, select summarize values by, and add an average here. Okay, so you can change how you're seeing the summary here like this. And once you're done with this, this is giving you the answer to your 9th question. Right now, if you add values here, it looks nice, but then again there's a grand total which is really not required because there's nothing much to add in here, right? So in order to remove grand totals, go to design, and you see subtotals here, grand totals here. You can add or remove grand totals or specify them for a row or column, totally depending on your requirement. Okay, so here I don't want to see grand totals, I'll turn it off for rows and columns. Now moving on from the questions, next topic is how do you group or ungroup data in pivots. Now pivot gives you an inbuilt feature of being able to group or ungroup date, time, and I'll show you how. Suppose you drag date into rows, it will automatically come grouped under the month. For ungrouping, you just need to right click and select ungroup. Okay, and for grouping, same way, right click and add group. Now instead of showing you month wise group, it will give you an option whether you want to group it by days, months, quarter, or year. If I group it by year, it's just gonna show 2020 because that's the entire year, and by quarter I have added months only for the first 2 quarters, so I'm selecting by month and by quarter. So it has grouped it as quarter 1 and the 3 months, quarter 2 and the respective 3 months, right? And another way of doing it is you can add the grouping field right before the date. So I have already categorized each of the date into respective months. So if you add it right before it, it will automatically start grouping it. Okay. Now suppose you do not want to see subtotal here. You do want to see the sales value for each date, but you don't want to see the April subtotal. Go to design and subtotals. You can select don't show subtotals. It will remove the subtotal. Likewise, if it is not showing in your table, go there and activate your subtotals at the bottom, at the top, however you want to see it, okay? Now, let's suppose you have summarized your data like this, okay? And you're going to discuss it with somebody who wants to look at it at each cut at a time. For example, first they want to see it at east zone, then they want to see it at north zone level. So in that case, instead of going here and manually selecting it, there's a better way of doing it. You can go to insert and insert slicer here, okay? Just make sure you have clicked somewhere within the pivot before doing it, otherwise it will take you to some other connections. So click within the pivot table, select slicers and add in slicers for whatever you will be actively filtering throughout your discussion, okay? You can remove or add at any time. What it will do is it's giving you the same list that you would have gotten otherwise had you clicked on the drop down, but it's giving you so much ease of operation while discussing rather than going into your drop down and selecting fields every time. You can just go ahead and click from here, okay? You can apply multiple filters and you can clear all filters with just a single click. There are a couple of pointers that you should know while using pivot. For instance, if you need to filter out an entire list out of a pivot, going there and manually selecting each entry is not a feasible option, and there are pretty high chances that you might end up selecting the wrong range, right? So if you miss out on even one of the items in the list, your result will be wrong. So why take the risk? So in such cases, I would suggest you select the list and go right below the column which has to be filtered, okay, and paste it there. Now in home tab, go to conditional formatting, highlight cells and highlight duplicate values. What this highlighting is doing, it's just making it easier for you to see what all needs to be filtered, right? So go ahead and select it and select all in one go, okay? So press Ctrl and then select all of the relevant cells. This is what I need to filter. Right click once you have selected and go to filter and select keep only selected items. So in simple 3 steps, you are having your filtered list out of the pivot table. Pretty easy, right? Now, one last point before we leave. Imagine having to add some new entry. Let's say the selling price of this item has changed to 120. It will not automatically reflect in your pivot, okay? So here you will need to right click on pivot and select refresh, okay? And there is one more option here. You can go to data tab and select refresh all or refresh from there, okay? And apart from this, imagine tomorrow if you need to add in a new column here, it will also not get automatically updated in your pivot. For this, I'm just adding a dummy number here, okay? Let's say this is the margin, and how do you incorporate this into the same pivot? Like rather than entering a new pivot, you can go to your previous pivot and in this analyze tab, you can change data source and you'll again get the same option which you got while entering pivot initially. And here you can go ahead and select the range. So here I just need to add one more column and I will add in that column here and it will do the job for me. So once I have added it in, it has incorporated margins as well. All right. And yeah, that's all for pivot basics, and let me know if there's any specific topic that you would want me to cover in the next video, and do share it with somebody who you think might get some value out of it. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.